Hi, Lara. Thank you very much for having me here on the New York Majlis. It's a great honor, and everyone is welcome in my studio. So we're doing fine, although you might have heard that Belgium has, statistically speaking, in percentage, the worst cases of, like the most cases of deaths.
Wow.
But the situation is fine. I mean, they're easing the restriction in a couple of weeks. Mm, Honestly, I'm not the best person to ask because I generally live in isolation myself, always in my studio and at home. So to me personally, not much has changed. Of course, I'm aware of the gravity of the situation. I also teach in an academy, so the lessons have been halted for a while, and we should slowly start thinking about alternative ways of continuing with the year. Other than that, I think you guys in New York are having a hard time as well, so we can empathize on that. So that's
What
the
are you
Corona
working
update.
on?
Yes, exactly. So this crisis made me think a lot about artistic practice and what can art do, you know, because when the whole world is in crisis and suffering and people are dying, you start questioning yourself about
Right.
what's the purpose of your work and your life. You know, we are isolated in our studio doing sculptures. Who needs them? No, in this crisis,
Mm-hmm.
who needs? Although it's not completely true, because during lockdown, I think the consumption of art has incredibly increased. We're all reading books, watching movies, listening to music.
Right.
So this is the time to understand that art is important, necessary, but on a practical matter, I had to think a lot about the purpose and the use of art. So I decided to dedicate my time to create something which has a bit of more practical value, let's say. So I've been developing a mask in marble. I've been carving a sculpture of a marble mask, a limited edition of 10 pieces. And then I've partnered with the UNHCR, which is the UN division that works with refugees, because we should all realize that we are in lockdown and we are closed in our houses, safe, but this is a luxury position. You know, we are the privileged ones who are able to lock ourselves down in our houses. There are many people who don't have the houses, and especially the refugees. You know, these people don't have the possibilities to isolate themselves. They don't have the medical facilities, so they are kind of the weakest. They have the weakest position. So I thought of helping them by creating this limited edition of sculptures. I'll show you in a minute. And I'm selling them to collectors, and the profits will be donated to the UNHCR to help refugees go through these difficult times. So probably they'll be, the money will be spent by giving them like masks and other healthcare systems, by building wells for providing water and sanitation facilities and all these kind of things. If you want to know more about this project, it's on my Instagram page. I've done a few posts about it, or otherwise on the UNHCR page online. But you can find everything on my Instagram.
Right.
So yeah, I've halted all my projects just to focus on this one for a minute. I mean, for a month or more. That's my first project. I don't know if you want to see already the works. Do you want the tour, or do you want to talk first about other things? Let me know what your...
Can you show us the masks, please, Athar?
Yes, I've done 7 so far because I make them as the orders come in. So, and they're just finished. Just this afternoon, I finished them. Let me show them to you.
Yes, please.
I'll need to take the phone off the tripod, so things might get a bit shakier. I'll do my best not to, but so.
And if someone wants to purchase one, how can they contact you?
Just they can either email me. My email is on my website, which is atharjaber.com, or on my Instagram page. They can just send a DM message. So these are the masks. Let me show them in their, more recognizable shape. Right? So they're marble masks.
Where does the marble come from,
The
Athar?
marble comes from Italy. The marble I wore comes from Italy. Not just because, that's what I had in my studio. And they are meant to be hang on the wall, like there is a hole and they'll be hang on a wall. But you can do whatever you want. You can also put them down. So these are the 7 masks that have been ordered so far. So there are 3 more available, let's say.
So how did you come with this idea of masks? I mean, what was your thought process at the beginning of the crisis?
Well, first of all, the thing that masks were the most, you couldn't really find them, the big scarcity of masks. And then everybody starting to make their own masks. And I said, what can I do as a sculptor? I work on marble. How can I help? I can make marble masks. That's all I can do, but they don't really help. But they can help by generating revenues to donate, to help people. So these people need the money. So I can do something and function as a, let's say, as an intermediary between the collectors who are interested in art, let's say, and the refugees who probably are not interested in art now. They're interested in surviving. So how can I create something that can help both? Collectors want the art, refugees want medical materials and sanitation things. So I'm functioning as an intermediary, and the mask has become the symbol of the struggle, now. So this is the reason. Of course, the whiteness of the mask has helped because marble is white, and the association is very easily made. Yes.
Is your work typically political?
More and more, let's say. When I started working professionally, which is about 12 years ago, my work was political, but in an indirect way. Now it's becoming more and more political in a direct way. Let me explain that, because I'm doing now a PhD, a practice-based PhD in the arts, and the theme is violence. So the topic of the PhD is sculpture and violence, departing from the fact that sculpture is inherently violent as an act. You need to destroy a marble block in order to create something, to take out what is inside the block. You need to remove material, and you do it in a quite aggressive way, with a hammer and chisel, which is very aggressive. So I've been delving into the topic of violence. I've been reading the literature, and what we generally understand with violence is the physical violence. So, but this is only a symptom of a much more dangerous violence, and the violence which is hidden in plain sight, which is the systemic violence, the structural violence of society that we live in, the exploitations and the control of the masses by fear and everything. So of course, I'm starting to address those topics much more. As a matter of fact, the text that you see behind me, I don't know if you can see something. It's a huge writing, and it's a quote by Karl von Clausewitz, which was a 19th century general. And he also wrote a treatise on war. And he said that war is just the continuation of politics by other means. So, what is politics? Politics is everything. It's the way we relate to each other, the power relations and the dynamics between people and authorities and governmenting systems, any authorities actually. As a teacher relating to students, it's also politics, how you behave with each other and the dynamics that command our relationships. So that's a piece, that's actually the quote, a continuation of politics by other means. And once the pieces will be done, I will destroy it. I will drop it from a height and it will break, because meaning that that action is also a continuation of politics, because everything is a continuation of politics by other means.
Okay, do you want to show us the other projects that you're working on in your studio?
Yes, let me, so I've been instructed to give like half-hour talk. That means I will need to be very quick, because if I spend a minute on each sculpture, we'll be over an hour. So let me just go through them and give you a few highlights. And if there are any questions, just ask the question. I'm also doing some experiments as well. So like what I'm known for are those bigger sculptures and and those heads. I'll get there in a minute, but I'm also doing some other experiments, because stone is becoming more and more important. What does stone mean? What is stone? What role does it play in society? And sometimes I'm doing things with humor, but there is a dark undertone with it, or a serious one, not dark. This is a marble block that I'm infusing with wine. So there is a hole in here, and this is a bottle of wine, and I'm just, the bottle is open, and the wine is being soaked by the marble. And as you can see, I don't know if you can see it right, but there is a dark hue in the marble, and that's because the marble is being colored very slowly by this practice. And this is a reference to, policies of conditioning of societies, or, how if you want to enforce politics, the best way to do it is very slowly, so that nobody notices, and you'll be able to sneak in, new policies. Like now, for example, we see that what's happening with the corona is that probably new measurements of control will be adopted by governments. They are looking now into controlling or monitoring the biometrics of people in societies to know when to, to see what's changing in body temperature, everything, to see if there is a risk of disease, but probably they'll use this information also for other things. Here I'm putting some marble pieces. How do you say it when you put things like food in oil and
fermenting?
Yeah, fermenting, or yes, exactly. Nothing. Yes, exactly. As Arabs, we know what we're talking about. But this is also affecting the color of the stone, and the stone is very porous. But people don't know the stone is very porous and has an open structure on a molecular basis. So liquids get into them. And of course, wine is a metaphor for blood, and the stone is, on religious terms, there are also many associations that one can make. These are older sculptures that are now in my studio. These are big figures, we could say inspired by classic sculptures or Francis Bacon-like figures, but also the themes are very important, the themes of anxiety, oppression. If you see, these bodies are kind of imploding into themselves, probably due to the effect of some outside forces. And it took me a year to carve this one. This was yeah, these big ones are 1 year projects, because they're all hand carved and they're improvised also. Something, and many people ask me, are they prepared sketches? No, I just improvise them. You can compare it to a jazz improvisation, and I just start and then I see what comes out of it. Of course, I know that I want to do a body and a figure, but I don't know that I wanted to put a foot there and an arm with like 2 elbows and the shoulder that's there. Yes.
Beautiful.
Now we're doing also a copy of this head. This is a new project that I'm planning for the coming year or 2 years. And it refers to another head that I have done previously of a woman, and that head was first carved by me, and as a finishing, I've submerged it in acid. And I was just curious, you know, just playing around what would happen if you put marble in acid, because I know that marble is sensitive to acid. And the sculpture got really scarred. The texture changed, and it resembles a lot the skin texture of a woman that got burned, like scar wounds from burning from acids. You know that many women are victims of acid attacks. So I decided now to make a series of about a dozen of these heads. They will be all different, and I'm looking out for organizations to collaborate with, where I will be selling those sculptures, and then also I will be donating the half of the profit to organizations that work with victims of violence. Because maybe not so many people know it, but the most victims of acid attacks are in the UK. People might think, I don't know, Afghanistan or Pakistan, but they're in the UK. And it costs about between 50 and 70,000 euro to take care of a person that has been a victim of acid attack. So I'll try to contribute, and also, you know, to raise awareness on the issue. We have some more heads over there. I don't think I'm allowed to show the other one next to it. This is the text that I was telling you about, that I'm actually doing now, but I've halted the carving on this one to focus on the masks. Here I have a stone which it's Latin, and it says, "Envy, I tread on you." And this is a treadstone, actually. For me, it's very important that people interact with stone. This is something that I experienced when I went to Jerusalem, for example, where everything is made out of stone. And people interact with stone in a very various ways in Jerusalem, but in any old city, but Jerusalem especially. And people touch the stone, they walk on the stone, and they get deformed. So the idea is this, you know, people really can literally, if this is like a mat, you know, where people will be able to walk on and wipe their feet on, and hopefully also contribute to the shaping of the stone, you know? And that's actually a very important thing that I encountered in Jerusalem, how the contrast between how people interact with art and how they interact with religious artifacts, for example. Maybe it's better if I do this. So, for example, if you see, when you go to museums, artworks are kind of sacred. Artworks are the holy places for, museums are the holy places for artworks. And the norm there is not to touch the works, right? Because they are sacred, you are not able to touch them. Whereas in religion, it's completely the opposite. Because something is sacred, usually in stone, it needs to be touched. If you go to Jerusalem, the wall, where the weeping wall, where people go and cry and touch, and then the stone where the anointment stone, where Jesus is said to be laid, people are going there and touching it. The rock under the mosque, you know. So people are literally worshiping the rock, and a way to worship and give value and make it even holier is to touch it, right? So there is this contrast, like in art, don't touch. In religion, please touch. And I want to maybe welcome this practice also on my work. Of course, I'm not going to advocate for some other people's work, but I want people to touch the works. I think it's important. Especially nowadays, no? Like when we cannot touch people, touching has become almost taboo because of the viral possibilities of passing diseases. But sculpture, let's touch sculpture and let's feel them.
Athar, since you mentioned Jerusalem, can you tell us about your experience there? And I saw one of your sculptures in the Palestinian Museum. in Bir
You
Zayt.
have been there? Have you been
I've
to
been
the
there.
museum?
It's magnificent. It's
Wow.
one of the most amazing art that I've seen there. It's exposed in the garden outside. So can you tell us more about the story of that?
Yes, definitely.
And
So
your collaboration.
in 2017, I have been invited to participate in the opening exhibition of the Palestinian Museum, which was an incredible experience for me. It was a residence, so I went there for 6 weeks, trying to understand the culture, trying to understand the society, the conflicts, the issues, but also the beauty. And so I got commissioned by the museum to do some research and then realize a work that will be then permanently displayed on the gardens of the museum.
Right.
And the work was exactly this. The work was inspired by a week stay in Jerusalem where I was observing human behavior with stone. You know, exactly what I said now, the holiness of the stones and how, you know, paradoxically, this area of the world which is dominated by conflict, where the stone is a unifying effect or the unifying object, you know, because yes, you have these three important religions and they have their issues with each other, but the stone that they worship, geologically speaking, is the same stone. Right? There is, I don't want to say controversial things here, but you know, it's a stone, and it's the same stone, geologically speaking. So it's interesting for me as a stone sculptor to realize this and see the power of stone. What it has such a wide range meaning, and so what I have done is I took a similar stone, a local stone, which we called. I took a Palestinian stone. That's what I described it, because we didn't have the name, so I called it Palestinian stone because we took it from Palestine. And the name of the work was Jerusalem stone, and it was a stone that is intended to be touched, and people are invited to leave their marks on it, either by means of touching it or by even writing their names on it. Because
and people do. And people do, actually.
People do, right? Yes, because this is something that we all have an instinct to leave something behind. And if you go to Jerusalem, or I had walks in the desert over there in the middle of nowhere, and you can see people scratch their names on the rocks and they left a date. And sometimes the date was 1850 or I don't know, 67. And it was very moving to be directly in touch with someone from 250 years ago, you know? That was the last legacy of this person, let's say. And the scratching is almost the most direct thing that you can relate to that person with. So, and then again, in this, let's call it the Holy Land, there are all these marks left by holy people that also interacted with stone, you know, like Jesus and Muhammad and everyone else. And what they did is they also left a trace of their existence into the stone, but they literally carved the stone. Let's say there is a place where Jesus is said to have prayed for 40 days, and then his knees are hollowed out in the stone, as if because of him resting his knees on the stone, so, you know, for me, that's, was he a sculptor or not? The foot of Muhammad on the rock and the hand of Jesus on the wall. Whereas we mortals, the only thing we can do is just write our names, right? Or scratch our names. So this stone is a kind of invitation for people to leave something behind. Also for the people who cannot go to Jerusalem, who are not allowed to by the issues that are happening there, you know, they have at least a Jerusalem stone in Palestine where they can leave their mark, where they can feel a connection with the city that they wish to go and see, you know? That's the general idea of the work.
I think, Athar, we have some few questions that the participant would love to ask you.
Okay.
Laura, can we take it from there?
Yes. Yeah, how about we start with Carmel? I'm gonna unmute you now.
Okay, hello. I was just realizing in your work that you have a very direct relation to the causes that you are talking about. And I feel like this is a question that comes up often with political works. If you're talking about, you know, something that is affecting many people and there's many victims in a cause, and then there's this kind of controversy that comes up with the artists who are benefiting and profiting from that work. And I see that you've kind of solved that dilemma by donating the profits directly to those causes, which then brings me to another question, which is, can art, you know, impact or help a problem? So I'm wondering, you know, what's your thought process behind that, and do you feel that your art can, in that way, directly help to solve a problem?
Well, I'm trying to help directly just by saying, doing what you just said, you know, by donating the profits to the people who need it, addressing those problematic issues, but not keeping the profit for me, giving it to them. But I think the potential of art is not only generating, let's say, financial means, but also raising awareness of specific issues. And in art, we can address specific topics in ways that are sometimes not feasible in reality. You know, let's take the art world as a parallel reality when things can happen that otherwise are not possible in the real world. To give you another example, I've been carving a block of marble with firearms. So I've been replacing the bullet, the chisel with a bullet, and the hammer with a gun, because technically speaking, not much difference. What is happening is not so much different, but the way the work is perceived, the perception, the interpretation of the work is completely different. But then again, for example, you could address the issue of heritage in conflict areas and what is happening to those heritage. Many people don't know about this, you know. We might know about it because our Middle Eastern origins, and we are worried about it and affected, and we care about those topics. But not so many people know about these things. For example, acid on women, not something that you can talk every day about it. It's also a very harsh topic. And then we are not usually willing to confront that reality, you know? And that's also something that is important. When you see a victim of acid attack, it's not pleasant to the eye. So people tend to look away. But when you see a sculpture that has been placed in acid, it's beautiful. I mean, many people told me, wow, that's a beautiful sculpture. And then people look at it and they walk around it. And so then you can really address those topics and talk about it, you know, and maybe change the way people look at actual victims, you know.
Right.
Something like
I do have one question about the acid. Did that realization come before or after the experiments? Like, did you feel
after?
Yeah.
After. Usually, I don't want to debunk any theories, but usually what happens in art is that artists just play around. The concept usually comes out. You know, the imbibing it with all kinds of meanings and theories. It wouldn't work, I think, most of the time. Of course, I don't want to generalize, but it wouldn't work to devise a theory and then make a work of art. It wouldn't be that powerful, aesthetically speaking. So we just play around, and then suddenly we realize that could have another meaning. You know, it's like, you know, music pieces that have been written 300 years ago still are being listened to, and in a different way, given the context we are listening to them, you know? So in that sense, artists and composers didn't know the full potential of the work that they were doing at those times, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Athar, do you want us to show the video of that performance piece that you mentioned?
The shot marble?
Yeah.
Yes, why not? And I'll tell you something more about it. This is a piece that I have carved in collaboration with the military academy. And I approached them, asking them if they would be willing to do some experiments. I explained them where I was coming from, not geographically, like conceptually.
Right.
And I was happy that they were willing to do that. And they were happy as well to experiment, because all they do there in the ballistic center is shoot at either glass or metal, you know, for the industry. They never shot at marble, so they were able to collect more data. And, you know, they're physicists, so they love data, so they were very happy to do that. And the results were quite spectacular, as you can see from the images. And here again comes that issue of, you know, something terrible is happening in those images. You have the bullet hitting the marble, and it's destroying the integrity of the piece. But at the same time, it's incredibly fascinating, and we are almost hypnotized by it. Of course, so it's been sublimized, you know? So here again, then you can talk about those things. The interesting thing is that this project happened almost simultaneously with the destruction of sculptures in northern Iraq. Remember, I think it was in 2015.
Right.
And it was almost simultaneously to that. So the discussion got fired up, like, what do you mean? Do you want to support them? Are you against them? Of course, I'm against them. And the idea now is being developed in a future collaboration that will have, we were almost supposed to do it like in this time, but due to the crisis, we couldn't do it. I have a collaboration with the Ministry of Defense in Belgium, where we will be carving in the same way with firearms and explosives at their training facilities. We will carve 4 big marble blocks. And then again, the profits of eventual sales will go to replace or to repair the damages affected on the original artifacts in the Middle East. So it's appropriating appropriating the destructive means of ISIS to create, because creation and destruction share a very thin grounds. So, and then repair what they did, you know. And then also on a more philosophical level, if you take someone's destructive means and you make of that gesture an artistic gesture, you're actually removing them from the possibility to repeat that action, right? Because they do it to destroy art, but if that action becomes art, then you disarm them. You literally disarm them from doing that again. Of course, I don't think they will get that level of sophistication, or maybe they don't care. But you know, this is philosophically speaking, would that be the issue or the point? Yeah, so this project was going to happen now. Unfortunately, we are postponing it to hopefully in the in autumn or winter of this year. Who? You're getting the big questions here. The purpose of an artist in society. I don't think I'll be able to give you one answer to that question, but what you know, art is whatever it is in the eyes of who is looking at it, and it can take so many forms. Art would be very boring if it would be one thing, you know. Art is there to make the world a more beautiful place, but it's also to criticize specific things. I'm more onto the to the criticizing or addressing issues that are itching, you know. But you know, the decorative arts of mosque or Islamic art is all about beauty and glorifying something divine. And then artists also in history have played different roles. For example, in ancient times, I'm really talking here about prehistoric times, artists had more a healing role in society. You know, the artist was a figure that was ambiguous between a doctor, the healer, the shaman, and the artist was the person who went into a cave for 3 days or a week and started hypnotizing, hallucinating, I'm sorry, and then making these drawings on the cave, and then he would come out illuminated after a week, and then he would like say heal the society or come with an answer. So he was you know, this healer, but also I know other views where the artist is more the dangerous. You know, Plato was against artists, but Plato always said that we should be aware of artists because they are the dangerous one. And actually, I like that point where we should show, let's say, people in general where the problems are, because I think we have a responsibility to think about that and see where are the problems in society. I'm not saying that we're able to solve them, because many of the problems in society for me are just inherent to human nature, like violence. I don't believe in a world of total peace, because I think that war is a characteristic of being a human being within a society that function in a certain way. So I don't think it's avoidable. Of course, we need to try to go against this notion, but reality is what it is. But I think it's interesting to study the biography of artists and see where they're coming from, how they think about things. But I think that art at a certain point takes its own path and detached itself from the creator, like, you know, sons and daughters that become individual beings that work in a specific way within a society. And the relation with their parents, it's something which might have some role, but then they develop themselves and how they interact with society. I was reading an essay some time ago where someone was claiming that Beethoven was a Marxist, but you know, Beethoven died before Marxism, so how could you claim that? But of course, within the views of that person, he had a point. He could make a point that Beethoven could have been a Marxist, and all these kinds of things. How, you know, the hymn to the humanity written by Beethoven was used as a hymn by the Nazis as well. So you can manipulate the meaning in art depending on your political agenda as well. So art, and that's probably the potential of art. It's open to all kinds of manipulations and interpretations. Basically because it's very interesting for me. You know, sculpture in the classical sense was until the beginning of the 20th century. When you wanted to make a sculpture, you would just make a small sketch of a sculpture, and then you had someone else making the enlarged version in marble. That was the position of the sculptor. But I think that's a quite boring way of making art. Of course, production-wise, it's very efficient, but then for me, it's like a journey. You know, like when I start a sculpture, I have an idea in mind, but I don't know where I end up. It's like going for a walk, not knowing where you want to go, but you know that you're going to walk for a month, and you don't plan it out. You just go, and then you like a path, and you take that path, and then, you know, maybe you might know that you're heading north or east, but you don't really know, and that makes it for me so much more interesting. And of course, I develop as well as a person. In the meantime, I read books, things are happening in the world, you meet people, you talk. So your ideas might change if you're open to that. And that also is then reflected in the sculpture. And also this need of us to define things, I think is very annoying. I like to linger in these ambiguous grounds. I don't want certainties. I like this. It's a human need, you know, to have certainties, but I like this not knowing it. And it might have to do with my background, because I'm originally from Iraq, but I'm born in Italy. I'm Dutch and I live in Belgium. So not even these countries know where I am from. So, and it has become the normality for me. So I'm fine in not knowing where to go and just taking the time. But this is only with the big sculpture that we're talking. Now, the amount of time that it takes me is more because I'm getting to do bigger projects, which involve collaborations with bigger organizations like the UN or the Ministry of Defense. So of course, there is a whole bunch of bureaucracies that goes with that, permissions, and they're really big projects. So it takes time just to realize them in that sense. I'm more interested into how people and humanity in general relates to stone in general, not only marble, stone, and also the behavior of humans in relation to things, and in this case with stone. If you think about it, if you allow me, I'll just replace marble with stone. I know that marble is a luxury thing. In that sense, I sometimes mistreat it. You know, I pour wine, I pour blood on marble, I make it dirty because it needs to live. And it will outlive us as well, you know. My works, as you see them, they're all unfinished, but they're not, they're finished in their unfinishedness because they are meant to be fragments. They will be destroyed in time, not by me, not by people, but just by nature. Only the range of time is much, much bigger, but nothing will survive anyway. But for example, what is for me more interesting is the power of stone, what stone means and how it has been used during the millennia. You know, stone is a weapon. Stone is a revolutionary tool. Let's think about the Intifada and the throwing of the stone. Stone is a means of enforcing policies of confinement, walls, border stones, ideologies are represented in stones like gods, statues of emperors, authorities are made in stone, and these then in turn develop into conflicts in the name of these divinities, let's say, or authorities, or something is written in stone. The law has been written on stone. So the stone is really bearing a lot of meaning with it. Mm-hmm. And what it means to break a law written in stone, you know, the 10 commandments are written in stone. So it's throughout human history, the stone is a constant. It's a partner in crime, if you want, of enforcing policies of control. And yeah, I think this is what interests me more. The luxury aspect is interesting, but I have not yet gone into that. Maybe, you know, thank you for the suggestion. I might develop that later. Okay, I'm a academic teacher, so I have to be very careful with what I'm going to say. But I don't think it's necessary to study art anymore. It depends what you want to do, you know, where your goal. Do you want to study the academic art and learn to draw and sculpt? And maybe an academy would be a good place for you. But then if you think about art as a means to express specific idea, you know, knowledge nowadays is not being kept a secret in art institutions or academies or universities. Knowledge is online. If you want to know something, you go online and you search for it, and you get probably even more knowledge than you would get during a 4-year study at an academy. Also because of legal issues, you know, so I would advise to be curious and to know what you want, have a goal. But I think that counts for everything in life. You know, you need to have a goal. It doesn't need to be very ambitious, but just have a clear goal and then work towards it. And we're living in a time that there is no excuse anymore not to get there, right? Again, knowledge is everything, but also the application of that knowledge is very important as well. So if you have access to internet, which is of course also a privileged thing, there is almost nothing that can stop you. I mean, develop yourself in different way, because arts nowadays is not just doing the work, it's marketing it, it's talking about it, doing live talks. You know, you can make wonderful things in your studio, but if nobody sees them, if the world doesn't see it, then it's as if nothing has happened. So you should develop so many more skills, and we're all trying. It's not easy. So the project that we're currently working on, the one with in collaboration with the Ministry of Defense in Belgium, is to carve 4 large blocks with the destructive means that have been used to destroy these monuments. So we create with those destructive means, and then we raise funds to repair the destructed original works. Yes. Completely agree. I think that's a very fair question, and it's one which I don't have an answer to, but it's true. You know, there are lives taking place in those sites that probably need the funding much more than the heritage. And it's also true that I really had the impression that heritage counts more, not in my view, but generally speaking, that heritage counts more than human lives, because the news coverage of those destructions in those times, you know, they were much, they were very prominent in the news, whereas people were dying daily, you know, but people don't care about the people dying, but the heritage, of course, it was a shocking event, because I think the importance of human heritage is a testimony to the existence of civilizations. Or if you erase that, then you erase the history of humanity. So I'm not saying that this is more important than human lives, not at all, but we need to preserve what has been left to us. But I think it was mostly, you know, the shock of seeing this thing, and how it was mediated, how it was shown. That, of course, humanity as a whole was a bit traumatized by what was happening. Then maybe we might want to heal those wounds, and contribution would be to give something.
Yeah.
You know, please forgive me. I'm going to say something which might be troublesome, but you know, human lives die every day, and we're kind of getting used to that. You know, we're getting sedated by it. You know, yeah, of course, 300 people died there, 300, which is terrible, but never in our generation we've seen destruction of monuments in this way. So maybe that might play a role. And that's what to get back to another question, that's the power of the monuments.
Absolutely.
How they're being politicized, and art can, this is something I'm interested in now. So of course, every answer will be depending on what everyone is reading at the moment, what one is listening. But I think I'm interested in, you know, artists, to put it bluntly, what they do is just observe the world from a different parallel world. You know, let's say they think about society, they observe society, they look at behaviors, and I think we have the power to point to specific issues that maybe most of the people don't have time to think about, and probably don't realize. You know, like again, I'm talking about authorities' behavior and how masses are controlled, and especially now we see COVID, people themselves are starting to ask to be monitored and controlled, you know, the biopolitics. So artists or philosophers and thinkers have the capacity to say, like, guys, wait a minute, what's happening here? Let's see really what the issue is here. Because, you know, the normal workers who have a 9-to-5 job and then they have a family, they don't have time to sit down and reflect and think about those things. So maybe it's about highlighting some issues and putting them in the face of people. Like, do you realize what's happening here? This is the situation. And then, I mean, we are just to show things, I think, here. You know, I'm not, I don't have the dream of changing the world of society. I just want to show things how I see them. And I don't want to, it's not, I don't want to have the responsibility, but I don't think I have the power to move the masses. I don't even want that. I just want to think and reflect and make sense of reality through my own medium. And hopefully that will bring people to some kind of realization themselves. And then, of course, it's up to the masses and the communities to engage. But it has become increasingly more difficult, I think, with the technologies and you know, the new developments. I hope I kind of answered, of not really answered, but you know. I think I would love to do more of public monuments and public commissions just to get that discussion started. Like, how do you relate to an artwork and how do you behave with it? And also the idea of, which relates again to the destruction of the monuments, how far do you go in protecting something? And how far are you willing to have people engage with it? Because art, again, originally speaking, going again back to the primitive traditions, was something to be engaged with. Take a look at African art. African art, as we perceive it here in the Western world, you know, these masks that we see behind glass, that they were used as objects for specific rites and rituals and behaviors, and they used to get dirty, and people used to spill something on them. Also in other traditions, you know, the anointment of things. So how far do we want to protect things and not let them live their own life? You know, we can put something into vacuum and then leave it forever untouched and pristine. But that wouldn't be very true to, you know, you need to think, you need to let go. I think we need to learn and let go of things. And also because of the meaning that things can get. Again, going back to those monuments, what we see now in ancient sculptures outside, they're all damaged. The Sphinx in Egypt is damaged, but maybe it has got another layer of meaning on top of it because of the damages. So what do we want to do? Do we want to reconstruct it, or we want to keep it to stand for what has happened? The whole discussion with the what's the name of the monuments in America that I wanted to take down because of the people portrayed were controversial. I can't find the term, but again, if you take it down, then you will forget. So maybe they should be kept. I don't know. So I think public monuments are, you know, in Mesopotamia, public monuments were used to be taken and placed somewhere else that were a symbol of power and politics and authority. So that's why we find specific pieces in Iran and not in Iraq, because like 3,000-4,000 years ago, with the invasion, they used to take those monuments and they would take it with them as they had the protective power. So art was much more integrated with life. It was really together. Now art is in a museum to be looked at with a safe distance and can't be touched. I think this way it loses a bit of its actual potential of starting a discussion or thoughts, these kind of processes, I think. I do every time. But of course, sometimes museum directors won't allow it, of course, because I had a show in Prague last year, and it was with other sculptors like I don't know, Anthony Gormley and Tony Craig and these people. And I said to the director, I want people to touch my sculpture, but of course, how do you? Like if they touch mine, they can't touch the others. So it's controversy. But I would love people to touch my works. I always say that these works will be beautiful in 400 or 500 years, because we have oils in our hands. You know, we by touching them, these oils go to the sculpture, they become yellow, they get this patina, they have lived, and we should let them live. You know, it's like scars. We tend, society, like we hide scars and all the plastic surgeries. We don't want to show our age, but you know, it's fake. Just leave the beauty as it is and let them be, and show your scars. In ancient Rome, portraits were like the more scars you or you know, lines, how I can find the term, the better, because it showed that you had a life, you had lived a life in dignity, and you know, and it shows through those wrinkles and lines. Whereas if you hide everything, nothing has happened. It's not interesting. No?